1935, Berlin. That year, the legal architecture of the greatest theft in human history was quietly assembled. The Nuremberg laws stripped Jewish citizens of their citizenship, banned mixed marriages, and, most crucially, excluded Jews from economic life entirely. What followed was not chaos. It was a methodical, state-sponsored transfer of wealth, executed with the cold precision of an accounting firm. Take the Kaufmann family, owners of a Berlin fashion retail chain, passed down through generations. In 1936, a young NSDAP functionary arrived at their door. Polite, unhurried, and explicit. Sell your stores at 15% of their real value, or we cannot guarantee the safety of your windows, or your daughter who attends the Jewish school. The family signed. The buyer was a shell company tied to Berlin's Gauleiter. Within a month, the stores reopened under a sign that translated roughly as Aryanized and proud. By 1938, 70% of Jewish-owned businesses in Germany had been seized through this process. Estimated losses, the equivalent of $8 billion in today's money. The slogan, Juden raus, Jews out, meant, above all else, their money stays here. Then came the night of November 9th to 10th, 1938. History calls it Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, named for the sound of shattered shop fronts, home windows, and synagogue facades crunching underfoot across German cities. But this was no spontaneous outburst of popular rage. SS archives confirmed direct orders from Goebbels and Heydrich. Target lists, synagogues, shops, home addresses, were prepared in advance. SA stormtroopers and Hitler Youth were issued crowbars, axes, and fuel. They were instructed to avoid fires in Aryan neighborhoods and to extract valuables with maximum efficiency. At Rosenthal's jewelry store in Frankfurt, stormtroopers brought explosives for the safe and loaded gold and diamonds into sacks on the open street. In Cologne, Hitler Youth threw silver candlesticks and Kiddush cups from a smashed synagogue into crates marked "For the National Community" and drove them away on trucks. In Berlin, elderly men were dragged from their beds and stripped of their wedding rings. Women were forced to surrender earrings and necklaces at gunpoint. The official SS report filed on November 11th documented the results. 267 synagogues destroyed, 7,500 businesses wrecked, 28.5 tons of gold and platinum jewelry seized, 1.7 tons of dental gold, nearly 8 tons of silver ritual objects and tableware, 30,000 Jewish men arrested for transport to concentration camps. And still, the machine had not finished with the living. For those who still possessed the means to flee, the state had designed one final trap: the Reich flight tax. Jews attempting to emigrate were required to surrender up to 90% of their remaining assets simply for the right to leave. Dr. Ernst Bloch, a respected Munich surgeon, sold his clinic at a fraction of its worth, then his house, then his library of rare medical texts. After paying the flight tax, approximately 85% of what remained, he was left with 40,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $200,000 today. He received the official clearance certificate and headed for the Dutch border with his wife and 2 children on April 12, 1939. A Gestapo officer examined the documents. "Everything in order, Herr Doctor. You may proceed." 500 meters later, at a second checkpoint, the documents were declared expired. The family was ordered out of the vehicle. His wife and children were shot on the spot. The doctor was bayoneted. The suitcase containing the money and his wife's family jewelry was in the local Gestapo safe within the hour, and in a Swiss bank account within the week. The flight tax certificate had been nothing but a ticket to a more violent trap. By 1941, the aggregate of all these measures, forced sales, pogrom seizures, emigration taxes, asset freezes, had transferred the equivalent of $63 billion in modern terms from German Jews to the Reich. The state had not merely robbed people, it had monetized their fear and their desperation. When there was nothing left to steal from the living, the system turned to the dead. The concentration camps became factories of secondary extraction, and the logic was the same logic that had governed everything before it: bureaucratic, documented, efficient. At Auschwitz Block 10 in 1943, a team of prisoners classified as Sonderkommando, themselves condemned to eventual death, worked what the SS called the processing unit. After the gas chambers disguised as shower rooms, bodies were moved to a conveyor. The temperature in the room reached 35 degrees Celsius from the furnaces. The air was a combination of chlorine, burning flesh, and human waste. The first station was the dentist, a prisoner, often an actual qualified dentist working under an SS guard's rifle, using dirty pliers, a hammer, and a chisel, extracted gold crowns and bridges from corpses. The quota was 50 bodies per hour. SS guards inspected every mouth afterward. A missed gold tooth meant immediate execution. The second station was the jeweler. Rings, earrings, and chains were removed with wire cutters and pliers. Swollen fingers from starvation meant cutting off the finger. Diamonds were pried from settings with a knife. 60 bodies per hour. The third station sorted the yield. Gold separated from silver and platinum, stones removed, dental porcelain discarded as waste. The metal went into a crucible and melted at approximately 1,000 degrees Celsius. The output was neat ingots weighing between 1 and 5 kilograms, stamped with the mark Deutsche Reichsbank Feingold 999 and a serial number. Each ingot came with a delivery note, ingot number, weight, date, shift number. According to the memoirs of Auschwitz Commandant Rudolf Höss, a team of dentists could process the bodies from a single transport of around 2,000 people in 4 to 5 hours. The average yield per transport, 8 to 12 kilograms of gold. The cost of production, a few pfennigs for bullets, and Zyklon B. One standard Reichsbank bar of 12.5 kilograms represented, at 23 grams of gold per person, approximately 540 human lives. Today, that bar is worth around $1,300,000. Not all extracted teeth went to the smelter. Quality crowns and bridges were disinfected, rinsed in alcohol, and sold through pharmacy networks and private dentists. A patient sitting in a Dresden dental chair in 1944 might receive a crown extracted from a murdered woman from Amsterdam. Hair was collected by the ton for mattress stuffing and rope manufacture. Ash from the cremated bodies was used as fertilizer or dumped in rivers. The total yield from 1942 to 1944, a minimum of 11 tons of dental gold from Auschwitz alone, and 15 to 18 tons across all camps. Behind those numbers, at minimum, 6 million lives. This was not a byproduct of the Holocaust. It was one of its central economic purposes. The death conveyor was also a profit conveyor. Having perfected the technology of total theft on its own population, the Reich moved outward. War was not only conquest of territory, it was the largest armed robbery in recorded history. Behind the tanks came special SS trophy brigades, Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg and its sister units, with a simple mandate: empty the banks, museums, and private collections of an entire continent. Austria fell in March 1938. Within 48 hours, SS officers and Reichsbank officials entered the vaults of the Austrian National Bank in Vienna and seized 78 tons of gold and $30 million in foreign currency, enough to fund the entire German military budget for 3 months. Some of the Austrian gold bore the marking Mexico, belonging to Mexico and entrusted to Austria for safekeeping. The Nazis were not troubled by this. International law was an abstraction. In March 1939, Czechoslovakia's central bank governor signed over 25 tons of gold under pistol at his own desk, including 4.5 tons held in trust at the Bank of England that Czechoslovakia had not managed to evacuate. Part of Czech gold held in the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland was transferred to the Reichsbank through pressure on the BIS's neutral directors. Neutrality, in practice, served the aggressor. In May 1940, while Rotterdam still burned after the Luftwaffe's deliberate terror bombing, SS special units broke into the Dutch central bank vaults and seized 143 tons of gold. Dutch bank employees wept as they opened safes at gunpoint. The gold moved by barge through the canals to Germany, while the city was still in flames. Belgium fell days later. 198 tons left Antwerp under tank escort, including Polish gold entrusted to an ally. Belgian railway workers were forced to drive the trains to the German border under threat of their families' execution. In September 1943, after Italy switched sides, the Germans presented their bill for protection to the Bank of Italy. 102 tons of gold, loaded under SS rifles. Rome and Berlin had been allies 5 years earlier. The gold that had once flowed between friends now flowed at gunpoint. Total from the Gold Blitzkrieg, 750 tons of stolen gold, approximately $15.5 billion at today's prices. That amount, stacked in standard bars, would form a column roughly 30 meters tall, the height of a 10-story building, and weigh as much as 150 African elephants. Historians estimate this gold extended the war by at least 18 months to 2 years, funding Swedish iron ore, Swiss machine tools, and Romanian oil. Parallel to the gold looting ran the art operation. Hitler's personal obsession, the Linz Plan, called for the greatest museum in the world to be built in his hometown. The Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, headquartered in Paris a short walk from the Louvre, approached the looting with near-academic methodology. Pre-war auction catalogs and private collection inventories, especially those belonging to Jewish families, were studied. Collaborationist art historians provided consultations. The legal fiction was confiscation of enemy property. Jewish collections were declared ownerless or hostile. Owners still alive and not yet fled were offered 1 to 5% of real value. More often, nothing at all. At the Jeu de Paume Museum in Paris, a vast logistics center operated around the clock. Cataloging, photographing, crating, loading. From the Rothschild family alone, 5,471 objects were seized. Boucher, Fragonard, Rembrandt, Vermeer. Baron Edouard de Rothschild was billed for the storage of his own paintings. The David Weil family lost the greatest collection of 18th century French silver in existence, over 1,000 pieces, described using the family's own photographic catalog. From Paul Rosenberg's gallery, 162 works by Picasso, Braque, and Matisse were taken. Picasso appealed for their return. Nothing was given back. From the Netherlands, art dealer Jacques Goudsticker fled his collection of 1,214 paintings. He died in 1940 when a ship he was escaping on was sunk by German aircraft. His collection was divided between Hitler's Linz project and Goering's personal estate. Hermann Goering made more than 20 personal buying trips to occupied Paris, selecting the finest pieces from confiscated holdings, paying in Jewish confiscated francs, or with promises to release prisoners from camps, promises he almost never kept. His country estate at Carenhall held approximately 1,500 works of art, total across Europe, an estimated 600,000 objects of art and culture stolen. Roughly half was sold through neutral Switzerland and Portugal for war currency. The other half was destined for the museum in Linz that never materialized, a mountain of paper in Rosenberg's ministry filing cabinets, a madman's dream, funded in blood. By 1944, the Reich was collapsing under Allied bombardment from the west and the Red Army from the east, and the mountains of stolen wealth had become not assets, but evidence. The SS moved to hide what it could not carry. Operation Mountain Crystal, the informal name for the program of underground concealment, deployed SS teams and geologists across Germany and Austria to identify deep mine shafts, mountain lakes, and remote fortresses. Participants were sworn to secrecy. Orders were verbal or in cipher. Those who helped and were no longer needed were liquidated. A ghost train, Convoy 677, Breslau to Wałbrzych, April 1945, left Breslau's freight yard carrying an estimated 10 tons of Reichsbank gold in bars and coins, boxes of Romanov jewels confiscated in Russia, Silesian Gestapo archives, and, according to the receipt signed by the commandant of Königsberg Castle dated April 12, 1945, the panels of the Amber Room, packed in crates with false bottoms labeled dangerous, acid. The train needed to travel 65 kilometers. It never arrived. No wreckage was found. In May 1945, local residents reported a muffled underground explosion near Książ Castle. In 2015, a georadar survey detected a 120-meter anomaly at the 60-kilometer mark. The Polish government quickly halted excavations, citing concerns about mines and chemical agents. A limited dig in 2016 found nothing, but investigators noted the dig took place in the wrong location. Lake Toplitz, in the Austrian Alps, received its own shipments under cover of darkness, boxes thrown from rafts into water that is crystal clear to a depth of 20 meters, and then becomes an oxygen-dead zone of submerged logs and debris below. A natural vault. Divers who enter did not always return. An American sailor named Liner drowned in 1947, tangled in submerged timber. In 1959, Austrian divers recovered printing plates, stamps, and equipment from Operation Bernhard, the SS counterfeiting operation that produced millions of fake British pounds. Initially intended to be dropped over Britain to trigger inflation, later used as a black cash reserve for SS operations after the war. In 1963, an experienced diver named Alfred Egner descended in search of further Bernhard evidence and never surfaced. His body was never recovered. In the Merkers salt mine, 860 meters deep, stable at 28 degrees Celsius, workers from a Buchenwald subcamp under SS Guard constructed reinforced vaults behind steel doors. The Reichsbank's contents arrived by convoy from destroyed Berlin on the personal order of Reich Finance Minister Walter Funk in early April 1945. What American troops found there represented an estimated 65% of the Reichsbank's total stolen holdings. Where the remaining 35% went is, 80 years later, still unanswered. The Nuremberg Tribunal passed judgment. The principal architects of the genocide and the looting were tried and sentenced, but the stolen wealth did not dissolve. Of 750 tons of stolen gold, the Allies recovered and partially restituted less than half. Hundreds of tons, worth tens of billions of today's dollars, vanished into underground labyrinths, Swiss vaults, or accounts in Liechtenstein and elsewhere. And the trail runs cold in the post-war silence of banks and governments that found it inconvenient to ask too many questions. Of 600,000 looted artworks, more than 100,000 remain unaccounted for. Researchers estimate that 1 in 10 works in major world museums has a provenance linked to Nazi theft. Neutral banks, auction houses, and art dealers were not passive bystanders. They were essential gears in the machine of theft and laundering. The history of Nazi looting is not simply a story about gold and paintings. It is a story about cynicism elevated to state policy, about greed and contempt dressed in the language of ideology, about a systematic attempt to strip not just the wealth but the cultural memory and identity of an entire civilization. The theft cannot be undone. The lives cannot be returned. But the record must be kept, so that we know precisely what human beings are capable of, and precisely how it begins.